season. We know she was dealing with a lot coming off Iowa National Championship game, entering the WNBA, big time transition. I understand that, but we also have to hold these WNBA referees accountable because they played a big factor in the assault Caitlin Clark took for the 2024 season because they did not call a bunch of calls that should have been fouls, bro.
The WNBA has a serious referee problem, and Caitlin Clark's rookie season is the battleground where this controversy ignited. I'm about to reveal footage that will completely change how you view her struggles in the league. From questionable technicals to missed calls on clear contact, the pattern is disturbing, and it matters, because no matter how much Indiana's front office improves, whether through coaching changes or better free agents, nothing will truly change if the officiating stays the same.
Now we know the Indiana Fever front office did everything they had to do, put the right pieces around Caitlin Clark, make sure they make it far in the playoffs, and possibly get a WNBA championship.
Clark's experience isn't just her problem, it's revealing deeper issues that could shape the future of the entire WNBA.
Prime example, what really made me start thinking about this was the DJ Carrington situation. They didn't call nothing on that for her poking Caitlin Clark in the eye, and that really had me thinking, like, damn, how many times did they actually, drop the ball and didn't call stuff against Caitlin?
Have you ever watched a basketball game and felt like the refs were straight up targeting one player? That's exactly what happened to Caitlin Clark last season, and I've got the receipts to prove it. When Clark entered the WNBA, viewership went through the roof. We're talking record numbers across the board. But while everyone was watching Clark, something weird was happening with how the games were being officiated.
Now, Caitlin got called for a technical for hitting the back of the backboard, but somebody viciously clotheslined her. We're not getting a call for that. And I just wondered if they would have done it a little different, just start calling stuff for people assaulting Caitlin Clark, that would have kind of minimized the pressure and minimized the assault I believe she would have took for the 2024 season. And going into this new season, once again, they're held responsible, bro.
The narrative around Clark's rookie season focused on her adjusting to the physicality of the pro game, but that oversimplifies what really happened. Refs routinely ignored clear fouls. She was hammered on drives, pushed on jumpers, and knocked around off the ball. Remember that offensive foul call on June 13th against Seattle? Clark made a routine dribble move, yet the whistle blew. The commentators were baffled. "I'm not seeing the foul there," one said as the replay showed minimal contact.
Second personal, let's take a look.
I think we ought to be able to see it from this angle. I don't see how that's an offensive foul to me.
Now, that was called an offensive foul on Caitlin Clark. Do we all remember that play? How was that an offensive foul, bro? How remotely is this right here an offensive foul, dog? How? Like, I'm just not getting that. But that was the call that was put on Caitlin Clark.
This wasn't an isolated incident, it was a pattern. Watching her season felt like seeing a biased umpire in a rigged game. Reviewing the footage makes it impossible to ignore. The officiating for Clark was different. Aja Wilson and Brianna Stewart made identical moves and got favorable calls, while Clark did the same and was hit with a foul.
I am not letting up on them damn WNBA referees because they are the biggest haters when it comes to Caitlin Clark, bro. I know we got haters everywhere, but nobody is worse than these WNBA referees.
Defenders guarded Clark differently because they knew they could get away with extra contact. They bumped her on drives, invaded her landing space on jumpers, and hand-checked her constantly without consequences.
Unnecessary. Kennedy Carter.
Seattle, and all of a sudden, we're pretty close. This has been as close as it's been all second quarter long. 44.
Clark's usage rate and driving frequency should have resulted in far more free throw attempts. For a player with her offensive workload, averaging just 3.7 free throws per game is absurd. Other rookies with similar styles got to the line nearly twice as often, yet Clark lost dozens of free throw opportunities that should have been hers.
Because there was also a stat that came out a few weeks ago that said Caitlin Clark received 17% of the WNBA's flagrant fouls this season, and 80% of those flagrant fouls were committed by the Chicago Sky sky against Caitlin Clark.
The impact went beyond just stats. Adjusting to a faster, stronger league is hard enough without realizing refs are using a different rulebook for you. It disrupts confidence, decision-making, and rhythm. As the season went on, it got worse. Once defenders saw they could get away with extra contact, they targeted her even more, with no consequences.
But when you have the face of your league getting nearly 20% of all flagrant fouls called against her, that is an issue. And that's not just an issue that the players have to work out. That is from top down. That goes to the commissioner level. Like, that is the level that needs to control these kinds of things.
The targeting of Caitlin Clark went from bad to dangerous real quick. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this. There's footage that shows Clark getting absolutely flattened going to the rim without a single whistle from the refs. How is that even possible in professional basketball? Check this out.
They're going to pick up Caitlin Clark from the second she touches the basketball. That's what Burton did there. All over Caitlin.
Wow.
That's a foul.
When you watch the games, Clark was playing under a completely different rule book than everyone else. In one shocking game, she drove toward the basket and got completely leveled. You can literally hear the commentators immediately shouting, "That's a foul," in disbelief, but the refs just stood there, whistle silent, as if nothing happened.
This clip out again. She's coming down the court. Wow. It looked like Morena did that to her, bro. But that's what I'm talking about.
This became a disturbing pattern. Clark was knocked to the floor 3 separate times in one game without a single whistle. It was like watching someone walk a tightrope with the safety net deliberately removed. Every fan watching at home could see it happening right before their eyes, leaving them shouting at their screens in frustration.
A tag on his page stated, "This has been pretty much the whole game. No call fouls for Caitlin Clark. The WNBA and their officials now know how to screw up a good thing."
Contrast in how players defended Clark compared to other guards tells the whole story. Take Marina Mabrey for example. Her defensive tactics against other players versus how she guarded Clark were literally night and day. Mabrey quickly figured out she could get away with much more physical contact against Clark without consequences from officials. Remember that DJ Carrington incident?
You can see Caitlin comes off a screen here. She dribbles back to her right hand, and then she's going for the pass to Aaliyah Boston when Dejanay jumps up, seemingly looking to try to steal the ball, and then hits her in the face. Caitlin is on the ground, the ball goes in the opposite direction, and the Connecticut Sun score. The internet doing what the internet does, they found a second angle to this play, and this is where a lot of fans were saying that this was intentional. It's in slow motion, as you can see here. Dejanay is going up for the ball, she misses, and then her hand bends down like this and goes straight into Caitlin's eye.
Clark got straight up poked in the eye. A dangerous action and definitely a foul by any standard. But the refs swallowed their whistles and didn't even review the play. Meanwhile, in that same quarter, another player got called for barely grazing an opponent's arm. The double standard was like watching 2 different sports being played on the same court. The situation became so obvious that even former WNBA officials spoke up. One former ref stated that the officiating standard for Clark was noticeably different compared to other players. That testimony comes from someone who knows the rulebook inside and out, not just disgruntled fans.
The tag on this one said, "How can the WNBA justify these referees? Caitlin Clark gets blatantly fouled twice, no call. I guess that's the playoffs, but these are bad."
What we witnessed wasn't just missed calls. It was a pattern that put Clark's safety at risk. Each ignored infraction emboldened defenders further. Some of these plays resembled football tackles more than basketball defense. When refs don't protect a player, physical play naturally escalates. What begins as extra contact quickly transforms into dangerous plays with no place in basketball. Clark wasn't just dealing with tough defense. She was facing potential injury while refs stood by watching game after game.
And you need to protect your superstars, and the WNBA has not done well this entire season of protecting their one superstar who brought in more eyeballs than anyone else has ever done in the league. She should have a special whistle. Calls like this should be made, should be reviewed. People should know right off the bat, it shouldn't be the first round of the playoffs that players think that they can still do this kind of thing to Caitlin Clark, to Angel Reese.
This isn't about special treatment. It's about giving Clark the same protection every player deserves. Basketball is physical, but there's a massive difference between physical defense and the dangerous plays Clark endured with zero protection from officials.
Not calling some of these fouls and not cracking down on some of these cheap shots and hard fouls that are so excessive, not only against Caitlin Clark, but against other players as well. You see compilations of them online. Not cracking down on these are going to turn people off to watching the WNBA, and it's not going to allow the league to grow and people to be more excited in players other than Caitlin Clark.
Fair officiating is the bare minimum every player deserves. But when we look at what happened with DeWanna Bonner, it's clear Clark wasn't even getting that much. Have you ever seen a more obvious shooting foul completely ignored while commentators are literally shouting about it in real time? The push was so blatant, it makes you wonder what a player would actually have to do to Clark to get whistled. This was the smoking gun that exposed everything.
It's Clark, 3 to shoot. Gonna have to hoist from the logo. Air ball. And Clark wanted a foul. Felt like Bonner ran into her. But a shot clock violation. Now Bonner and Clark get into it.
Oh, this is what the people was talking about with DeWanna Bonner.
Oh, yeah.
When Bonner clearly pushed Clark during her three-point attempt, entering her landing space and making contact, it should have been an automatic whistle. Protecting shooters is a fundamental rule in basketball, a safety measure specifically implemented to prevent career-threatening injuries when players are at their most vulnerable. For officials to miss this call wasn't just incompetence, it was the perfect illustration of the double standard Clark faced all season.
No foul was called. One. It's Clark, 3 to shoot.
I forgot about this one.
What's particularly frustrating about the Bonner incident is how routinely this exact foul gets called for other players. The rules couldn't be clearer. A defender cannot enter a shooter's landing space or make contact during the shooting motion. It's basketball 101. Yet somehow, when it happened to Clark, the whistle stayed silent.
This is when Caitlin Clark got a tech, I think.
They got it on Caitlin Clark. Not go against Boston. That's it.
Oh no, this was the flop. Yes, I remember this. This right here was the biggest flop ever. Yes, she flopped on that when it got that.
Then came the moment that finally opened everyone's eyes. After missing a shot, Clark hit the backboard out of frustration with herself. Something countless players do after missing. The official immediately hit her with a technical foul, explaining, "He told me it was disrespectful to the game of basketball." Take a look. Are you kidding me? What does it say about our sport when such a normal reaction is punished while others get away with far more?
I got a technical for basically being mad at myself because I missed the three and then I went and hit the backboard, and he told me it was disrespectful to the game of basketball. So
this technical was especially outrageous considering what other players were getting away with in the very same games, screaming directly at refs, throwing towels, making theatrical gestures of disbelief, all without penalties. But Clark lightly hits the backboard after missing her own shot, and suddenly she's disrespecting the game? The double standard couldn't be more obvious.
I don't know, it reminded me of the technical that I got in college where I said, damn it, where it's like a personal frustration. Had nothing to do with my team, had nothing to do with their reffing, had nothing to do with other team. It was just because I'm a competitor and I felt like I should have been making more shots. So, but I think he fired me up to continue to play a lot harder. I thought we got a lot better after he did that. So I want to thank him for that.
The numbers tell the story that the video evidence confirms. Clark averaged just 3.7 free throw attempts per game throughout her rookie season. For a player with her usage rate and frequency of driving to the basket, that number is shockingly low. Players with similar playing styles typically get to the line nearly twice as often. The math simply doesn't add up unless you acknowledge the officiating bias.
Got the technical for smacking the backboard. At the end of the day, the only problem the Fever have going into the 2025 season, it's the WNBA referees at this point. They got to be held accountable, and I will watch every move they make.
These two incidents, the Bonner push and the backboard technical, aren't isolated mistakes. They're part of a pattern that reveals how differently Clark was officiated compared to her peers. It wasn't about adjusting to physicality or earning respect as a rookie. It was about officials applying a completely different standard to one of the league's biggest stars.
Last thing, you guys, and it might be controversial, but there has been a lot of talk about a special whistle that certain players in the WNBA get and some players don't. But I think that this is something, again, that we can compare to to the NBA. Superstars are going to get a special whistle, and they should get a special whistle. Do you know why? Because at the end of the day, it's not just the sport, it's the entertainment of the sport, and you need to protect your superstars.
Let me tell you something. The Indiana Fever front office isn't playing around anymore. They've completely transformed the organization by bringing in a new coach and revamping their roster to create the perfect environment for Caitlin Clark to thrive in her sophomore season. But here's the thing. All these moves won't mean anything if the referees don't get their act together. The Fever have rebuilt with purpose, addressing coaching, strengthening the supporting cast, and creating a system that maximizes Clark's talents. But the one variable they can't control, those whistles. The WNBA must address last season's officiating before tip-off. What do you think the league should do to hold referees accountable? Will the league finally align its officiating with the brilliance on the court, or will this pattern persist? The future of Clark, the Fever, and the entire league depends on getting this right.